Hello and welcome to another Divinity Original Sin video. This is, and I swear to God, this is the final Warfare tier list that I do for the game. I've done how many have I done of these before? Maybe 2 or 3. But I promise you this time this is the finalized, official, well, my opinion anyway. My official opinion on what belongs where in the Warfare tier. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this. So, as you can see on the left hand side, we go from unique being the best, common being the weakest. I've color coded and everything. Looks beautiful, right? Anyway, enough shit talk. Right, okay, let's go. Right, we're gonna start off with. Let's start off with Provoke, one of the most useless abilities in the game. Costs 2 AP, requires 2 Warfare, does no damage whatsoever, and taunts as an AoE. So it doesn't deny the enemies from doing damage. Tanks are not really a thing in this game. And to top it all off is that Provoke isn't what I'd call super reliable. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if you're spending 2 AP not to do any damage, I sure as hell would hope the crowd control would be reliable, but it's not. So it's got so much going against it. Tanking is not really a thing in this game. I really would love for this to function in this game, but it just doesn't. It's tragic. It's a nightmare. Anyway, so this is going to be in the common. Next, we're going to touch on Whirlwind. I'm going to put this straight into Legendary. 100% damage. Really nice AoE range. One of the rarer AoE abilities for melee characters. Yeah, just really fantastic all round. Legendary skill. I'm gonna put Crippling Blow next to Whirlwinds. I really like Crippling Blow. Crippling Blow is capable of AoE, but very short range, but it's still capable. So in terms of the AoE itself, it's inferior to the Whirlwind, but because you can still AoE, it's kind of nice. You can use this to kill your own totems whilst doing damage to enemies as well. That's why I really like it. And also that it just does additional damage than the basic attack. I believe it does 115%. And then as a minor bonus, it cripples as well. So that sometimes can come in handy. So I think overall on balance, it probably makes the Legendary tier 2. Battering Ram. Battering Ram, I think, is deserved of the Legendary. Now the damage itself is pretty weak. It's 50% for 2 AP. Obviously that's terrible, but that's not really why it's getting its ranking. The reason why it's getting such a high ranking is mobility, hard crowd control, potentially AoE crowd control. So it does make up in a lot of ways. A little bit trickier to use compared to Battle Stomp, but all the same, if you're using it correctly, hard AoE CC is sought after. So yeah, I like it. Don't always necessarily need it on the bar, but it still doesn't take away the fact that it's still a very good skill. Next, we're going to touch on Guardian Angel. Guardian Angel, I believe, enters the game at level 16. Something like that. and it very much fits in the same useless slot is Provoke. It's a defensive spell, and it kind of works like I can't remember if a Paladin Blessing. Basically, it reduces damage from your teammate and gives it to you, but you have to be in such a short range. It really makes you susceptible to AoE. So, a number of things I don't like about this is that it's more suited to a tank. I've already touched on tanks suck. The range of its protection is really short, so yeah, it just makes you susceptible. It's defensive. Even honestly, like, even if the range of it was a lot larger, I mean, it depends on how large, I suppose then it might see some use, but no, overall it's not really ticking any boxes. So for me, it's a common, it's something that should be avoided. Next we're gonna go on to Onslaught. Onslaught, probably legendary. Depends on the situation. So if you're looking at it in terms of like you're fighting multiple enemies, it's not going to be as great as Whirlwind. But it is like superior as like a boss killer type skill. It's 300% damage for the 4 AP, which is very, very good. Can crit 5 times. Very good. So the damage to a single target is amazing, but if you're comparing it, if you're trying to compare it to overall potential damage, it's not as good as some of the others. So really, the ranking would kind of like vary depending on the circumstances in the fight. If you're fighting like I don't know, let's just say, I don't know, let's say Kraken, for example, one really big strong enemy, sure, this would probably be higher, it'd be more valuable than these, but for the most part, AoE is very, very valuable in this game. So I think on balance is probably legendary. Next we're going to touch on Blitz Attack. Actually, I'm gonna come back to that one. And we're gonna go on Bouncing Shield next. Bouncing Shield, I'm gonna put into Epic. Very solid, reliable spell. Doesn't miss. Can hit up to 2 targets. You can use dead enemies to hit single targets if needed. Damage is based on the strength of the shield in your warfare. Something to bear in mind. Will crit with Savage Sword Leash. You have access to this from the beginning of the game. Sort of downside to this spell is that it requires a shield, and for the most part you're not really going to be wanting to use a shield unless like maybe you play like a summoner type. But you know, it's very solid. Damage is very, very steady. I would just need to keep your shields updated. It works for me. It works really well with the likes of Anne Mafflin, I believe it's called. Get your HP down low, and then this thing's doing incredible damage for a summoner. So just something to think about. So yeah, for me, Bouncing Shield is epic. Next I'm going to touch on Challenge. Challenge I've always just put in unique, not because it's like far superior or comparable to some other unique spells, but simply because on balance, let's just take a look at it, right? So it requires free warfare, so for skill users this is easy to get. And Necromancer, again, is easy to get. But it's just the fact that it costs 1 memory, which is not really much, and it costs 0 AP. So for 0 AP, you can use this as and when possible. So really, there's no risk in this. In using the challenge itself. So there's no like I said, there's no real risk, and there's only benefits. Now if you're spending 0 AP to gain health, armors, and damage buff, how could it not be top tier? You're getting so much stuff for free. Now I know the health isn't so important, maybe the armor is not even that important, but the damage is quite a nice buff to get for 0 AP, and that is what that is how I look at that's how I look at challenge and why I rank it so highly, because you don't really invest too much into it and you get so much back. So for me it's a unique tier spell. Next, we're going to touch on Enrage. Enrage, I really like. It's the core of a lot of early builds, and right up to sort of like middle late game actually as well. It can still be prevalent, especially if you're like a ranged build where spells just really isn't necessary to have. So you pick this up nice and early at level 4. The damaging, the DPS increase to the build is really noticeable. So yeah, even though it does come with a nasty little silence for the skill users, it's not that detrimental to you. Obviously, at some point, I think with like warrior types, at some point you will. Well, I felt that I wanted to drop this earlier with my warrior than the ranger, because sometimes it's nice just to have those jumps ready to go. So for me, I would probably put it in divine, and my argument for it to be in divine is it's critical to a lot of builds. Critical. Yeah, critical to a lot of builds. It's core to a lot of builds. It increases your DPS from like level 4 to whenever you drop it, and it's still prevalent until no, like it depends on the ranger build, I guess. Like for me, even at level 14, I'm still using Enrage. Maybe even up to 16, I'll even keep hold of it. You know, it makes even more sense if you've got glass cannon. You know, the more attacks you're making with it, the bigger the argument for using Enrage. Really, the only time that you'll be considering dropping is when you get a substantial amount of critical. And for rangers, you don't really get that until maybe like later in the game. Whereas if you're two-handed, you can build up the crit a lot more quicker than the ranger. So yeah, for me, divine. Blitz attack I think does 70% damage per blitz, and it blitzes up to 2 times. So you can hit 2 enemies with this. It allows you to reposition, but the thing that I really like about blitz attack is the fact that you can attack from high ground, you can attack from low ground, though it's a little bit more difficult, but no other mobility skill allows you to attack and move at the same time to a higher ground than blitz attack. So that's its unique thing. But for the most part, you are going to be using Bull Rush because it does more damage and it just causes a bleed. But there's occasions where enemies are a little bit more split apart and you're not able to use Bull Rush. Sometimes on those occasions, Blitz Attack will be better to use. So the damage isn't that great. It is a slight AoE, and it does come with great mobility. Though most of the time other skills will probably be priority. The times where you're not in that position and blitz attack makes sense, it's nice to have on the bar. So for me it makes epic. And you pick this up mid-game, so you get plenty of fun and use from it as well. And I really like the sound effect to it as well. Not that it's got any bearing on the rating, but I just thought I'd say so. Okay. Battle Stomp for me is the king crowd control in the game. The best one. It does so much though, hence why I'm going to put it in the unique tier. Now, yes, it's only 60% damage for 2 AP, which is really mediocre. But let's look at what else it does. It's 10-meter range crowd control. AoE crowd control, so much easier to use and more reliable to use than the battering ram. Clears surfaces, clears clouds, smoke. Did I mention it's an AoE knockdown too? But anyway, for me it's the best crowd control in the game. Unique tier. We come to some of the trickier ones now. Deflective barrier. I hate facing this because you can potentially one-shot yourself, which is a problem. But when it comes to you using it, it's not as impactful, I'm afraid. Is it defensive? Provides smallish amount of armor, but it still provides. But I guess the cool thing about it is that it's offensive and defensive at the same time. It does deflect a lot of spells that you probably wouldn't think it would. And there are some really cool interactions with it as well. But I would say because it's a defensive, it is very expensive defensive at 2 AP. But it can dissuade enemies from attacking you, and if they do decide to do so, you know, they're gonna take damage back in return, which is kind of nice. So I'd probably say overall it's probably rare. Probably fits in the rare tier. Okay, and then we got I'm gonna do overpower first. Now overpower, I need to think about this a little bit. Overpower is something that I've previously ranked in like rare. I think about rare. So let's think about it. So it's 2 AP, 3 source points, 150% damage. So the damage is really good, but it's very good. But is it worth using? Now, the way I see this skill is more for the sword and board type, which I just don't recommend playing at all. Because the way it works is if you've got more physical armor than the opponent, then you can remove the entirety of his physical armor. And obviously with a shield you're going to have more armor, so that makes that more possible. But if you're two-handed, more than likely that's not going to be a thing. And then it kind of looks like a very expensive, albeit very good damage to ratio attack. So the way I see it is that the sword and board is terrible. You shouldn't really be playing it unless it's for fun. So because the skill kind of works for that, it's got to be marked down. The damage per AP is really good, but I mean, is it really worth using this just because it has 50% extra damage than what you would normally see per damage per AP? No, I don't think so. Considering you've got to spend 3 memory for this thing. 3 source points. So the build that it's kind of meant to be played with sucks. And it's quite frankly not worth the squeeze in like a two-handed build. For me, like, I would probably see it as a common, but I think just on balance, if you are gonna play with sword and shield, it would rank a little bit higher, I guess. But because that build's trash, I'd probably just put it in uncommon, just because I don't think it genuinely just doesn't belong in with the completely useless provoking guardian angel. But at the same time, it's not something that I would ever consider using, because it's either too expensive for what you want to do with it, or the build sucks. But that's just how I see it. Phoenix Dive, one of 4 jumping spells. Phoenix Dive. I'm sort of torn between perhaps rare and epic. Like, Tactical Retreat is unique. Tactical Retreat is unique, and I think either like Cloak and Dagger is legendary or divine. In my view. And I think the 2 ones that I just mentioned are so much better than Phoenix Dive. I think I'm going to stick with rare. It's a 1 AP jumping spell which gives a fire surface. Not super impactful. Can see use, like if you want to use totems on that surface. I mean, there is that going for it, but it's just generally just not that impactful. It's just simply just a jump for 1 AP, which is steady. But yeah, compared to some of the other options, it's just not that great. So yeah, probably rare for me. And then we have Thick of the Fight. Thick of the Fight. Now, this I'm going to be leaving in the unranked, but I am going to give my thoughts on this one before ending the video. Is that the reason why I'm leaving it unranked is because there's so many different circumstances and situations that it'd be hard to balance where it ends up, because there's situations where it's useless and it's great, very similar to mass sabotage. So okay, let's break it down. So best case scenario for Thick of the Fight is using this on a mage type, most likely a necromancer because it builds warfare naturally, is to use this pre-fight. That way you're saving 2 AP and you're getting multiplicative damage bonus, which is pretty huge. So in that case, if you're using this with a necromancer or a mage, but more so of a necromancer because it fits more naturally, you know, there's no reason why it wouldn't be unique, or you know, in or around this area. Pretty incredible. Even if you're in a situation where you are using it during combat, again, probably we're looking at Divine Legendary. And then you got another situation altogether. If you're using this as a skill user, if you're using this pre-combat, it's sort of high-ish in the tier list. So we got, and then on top of that, if you're trying to use this during combat, I think it's not worth using at all. And obviously the other thing to bear in mind with Thick of the Fight and the skill user that is then additive, so the damage is decreasing further. So you've got like Necromancer pre-combat, like up here, then like during combat, and then you've got like skill users pre-combat, and then you've got skill users trying to use it during combat. It's a waste of time. It's not worth it. So depending on what build, how you're using it will completely determine where this ends up. So because of the huge amount of variations, I'm gonna leave it in the unranked, but at least you have an idea of where I would sort of place it based upon the builds that you're using. So to round up, we have Challenge and the Battle Stomp in Unique tier, Enrage is in Divine tier, Whirlwind, Crippling Blow, Battering Ram, and Onslaught in Legendary, Bouncing Shield, Blitz Attack is in Epic, Phoenix Dive and Deflective Barrier in Rare, Overpower in Uncommon, Guardian Angel, and Provoke in the Common tier, and then, as explained, Thick of the Fight is in Unranked. Anyway, feel free to leave your comments down below, and as always, thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one.